Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you on today's PEFC Public Consultation webinar. Today, we have an exciting new country, which will become the new addition to the PEFC Alliance, and this is Guyana from South America. And today we talk about the Guyanese Forest Certification System. My name is Hubert Inhäuser. I'm a technical officer at PEFC International, and it's a pleasure for me to be your host today. I will have on the screen now the webinars program, which is very similar for those who attend regularly these webinars, that I will have a short introduction about PEFC International for those who are not that familiar with the system. And then our excellent team in Guyana from the Guyana Forestry Commission will guide you to the details of the Guyanese Forest Certification System. And at the end, of course, as always, we will have time for any clarification questions what might arise at the audience. So let's get started. PEFC stands for Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification Systems. We are an alliance of independent national forest certification systems under the umbrella of PEFC International. All of these national forest certification systems are based on PEFC sustainability benchmark standards or international standards like the chain of custody. This is a voluntary mechanism promoting sustainable forest management through independent third-party certification. We are very proud that we are the world's largest forest certification system and provider of 3/4 of the world's certified and sustainably managed timber. Here on this map, you can see our global coverage. It's important to note that the dark green colors show all the national systems which has at the moment endorsed national forest certification systems. And in light green, you can see the countries which at the moment do not have endorsed national systems. And when you look at Latin America, you can see Guyana, and this is the first endorsement process for the Guyanese Forest Certification System. The system was submitted recently, earlier in May, and PEFC assessment will be carried out by the independent assessor, yet to be appointed. And as part of this assessment process, there will be a 60 days public consultation period, which is hosted by PEFC International. You can have the link. Please take a look at the complete Guyanese Forest Certification System documentation. We opened the public consultation today, and all the interested stakeholders have the possibility until 28th of July to comment and have their say about the system. In any case, if you're interested, the complete system documentation is available. So even if you would like to see the standards, you are able to do so by visiting that link and download the system documentation. It's important to know that all of the comments which may be submitted during the international public consultation will be considered by the assessor in the assessment report. And that's the short introduction, what I promised in the beginning. And now I'm very happy that we have the Guyana Forestry Commission online. And I would like to invite the team from Guyana to start their presentation. And I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you. Guyana, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hubert. Please allow me to share the presentation. 1 second. Greetings, everyone. Good evening and good morning, wherever you are. Unfortunately, the chairperson for the Guyana National Forest Certification System is unable to join at this point in time, Mr. Goberdan, but I will be presenting on his behalf. So I will just give you a brief overview of what the webinar will look like. I will give an introduction about Guyana and ultimately the Guyana Forestry Commission, and also how the standard setting process was developed and into the Q&A. Now, just a brief introduction to Guyana. We're located in the mainland of South America. It's next to Brazil, Venezuela, and Suriname. The size of Guyana is 83,000 square miles with a population approximately to 800,000, less than a million persons. We're the only South American nation in which English is the official language. Now, with regards to our forest cover, we have about 18 million hectares of forest, which is approximately 87% of the country's total land area. Our deforestation rate is minimally low. As of 2021, we would have recorded about 0.042%, and Guyana has recorded the second highest percentage of forest cover on Earth, recorded in 2022. Now, these two pictures that is on screen shows our national Kaitro Falls and Pencum Mountains. As you can see, the inland of Guyana is very much forested. So with regards to Guyana's forest sector's contributions, on an annual average, we produce about 440,000 cubic meters of trees in terms of production. The sector employs indirectly and directly about 22,000 persons, and the forest sector contributes 4% towards the gross domestic product of the country. Now, about the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Commission is the regulatory agency for managing state forests here in Guyana. I'll just briefly touch on the functions. We're responsible for advising on issues relating to policies, forest laws, regulations, managing and administering the state forest resources in terms of issuing state forest authorizations and permits with regards to forest concessions allocations. And also, we're responsible for developing and monitoring standards and procedures for these forest operations. In terms of forest protections and conservation, we're also responsible for developing and implementing strategies in that regard. And two additional functions of the GFC, we do some sort of research to improve forest governance and sustainable forest management of the forest here in Guyana, and also to promote education and training to improve on compliance. So I'll touch a bit on the governance structure of the Guyana National Forest Certification System, which we've submitted for endorsement under the PEFC. So the Guyana Forest, apart from the Guyana Forestry Commission being the regulatory agency, when we made application for membership in 2019, we were approved to be both the national governing body and the standardizing body for overlooking and administering the PEFC process in Guyana. And the board of directors of the GFC is the highest decision-making body for the process. Under that umbrella arm, we have the Guyana National Forest Certification System Secretariat that will provide any facilitation and coordination support to the NGB, the standardizing body, and also the National Standard Setting Working Group. Fortunately, the GFC representative is also the chairperson of that working group. So in terms of our forest type here, we're a tropical country and we have 6 major forest types. Majority is the rainforest. We also have the montane forest, swamp and marsh, dry evergreen, seasonal, and along our coastline, we have the mangrove forest. And I must say that all of the forests here, it's naturally regenerated. So this map is showing the main forest land uses and tenure. With regards to the state forests, which GFC heavily regulates, there are two main state forest authorization, and these are the large concessions and the small concessions. The large concessions are areas more than 8,097 hectares, while the small concessions are areas less than that, and it includes community forest management associations as well. We also allow, based on the law here in Guyana, we also allow commercial harvesting of logs on private lands. Those are operators with legal document to the private land. Amerindian villages, this setup is basically commonly owned by a group of people, the village council, and them having legal right through an absolute grant or a certificate of title. Then we have lands first that where timber can be salvaged with regards to a mining license or permit, an agricultural lease, or anyone who may have an infrastructure permit or approval letter to convert a piece of forested land for any other alternative use. So this is the summary of our state forest classification. So we have the 18 million hectares that I would have mentioned earlier. 12 million hectares is allocated under the umbrella of the Guyana Forest Commission, where only so far 43% of that 12 million hectares has been allocated for production, which equates to 5 million hectares. Now, from that portion, majority has been led to small concessions at 43% and large concessions at 51%. So the remaining forest area here in Guyana, it basically reserves and state lands for any alternative use. I will briefly go through Guyana's journey towards a sustainable forest management. We would have had a very long journey, as you can see from this diagram. In the early 1998 to 2000, we would have developed a code of practice along with a wood tracking system to help us in terms of strengthening our monitoring processes to ensure that whatever timber product is being on the market, it comes from a legal and sustainable source. In 2002 to 2005, we would have revised the code of practice, and also we would have had a mission from the ITTO to improve on any gaps identified in our system. In 2007 to 2009, we would have had major contributions towards the forestry sector in terms of we would have had our Guyana Forestry Act and the Forest Act revised and gazetted, and also we would have signed a memorandum of understanding with the Kingdom of Norway, for the protection of our forests and establish a national low carbon development strategy. Moving on to 2012, Guyana started formal negotiation on a voluntary partnership agreement with the European Union on a forest law and enforcement governance and trade initiative, which aim at reducing illegal logging, improving forest governance, and improving market access to trade. In 2018 to 2019, we would have adopted the 2018 forest regulations, gazetted our code of practice, initial the voluntary partnership agreement, and of course, initiated the process of the Guyana National Forest Certification System to be endorsed under the PEFC. In 2022 to 2023, Guyana would have been the first country, to issue carbon credits for forest protection. We would have ratified our voluntary partnership agreement with the European Union, and of course, submitted the Guyana National Forest Certification System for endorsement. So the relationship with PEFC and other policies, it has a strong linkage with our current policies here in Guyana, especially with the low carbon development strategy 2030. I would have mentioned that it has a strong linkage with FLEC and also our agreement with the Kingdom of Norway. And the synergies basically complements all other policies, and it will help to speed up related initiatives. So this is just a snippet of our legislative, policy, and procedural framework for the forest sector. We have a Forest Act of 2009 with its accompanying forest regulations. Like I mentioned, it was revised in 2018. We also have our Guyana Forestry Commission Act. We have our strategy based on the low carbon development, national forest policies, our forest plan, and relevant code of practice. But I must mention our code of practice for forest operations. We have clearly defined procedures for all of the critical control points of the supply chain, starting from allocation straight on to the sale of timber on either the domestic or the international market, and also how we deal with the importing of timber so that it does not tamper with our local timber here on the market. Just to touch a bit on our sustainable forest management practices, we have guidelines, code of practices. Our chain of custody is well developed, meaning that any log at the point on the market, it can be traced back to its origin. We have about 30 forest stations strategically located at all the critical control points here in Guyana so that we can effectively monitor our timber products that comes out of the forest. The Guyana Forestry Commission would have also passed all of our third-party independent forest monitoring audits from the period of 2012 to 2022. With regards to our practices itself, we have a low intensive selective logging. Operators are mandatory required to take the GPS coordinate for every tree harvested. We have an annual allowable cut attached to the quota and the forest cover within a particular area. We do not encourage large canopy openings. We have a requirement of 100% pre-harvest inventory done for our large companies and an assessment for the smaller companies. Harvested logs are attached with a tag so that they can be traced throughout the supply chain. And we have our officers have electronic scanners that can do intense monitoring to see at any point in time to do any validation or verification for our documentation and to detect any non-compliance along the supply chain. So this is just to show you what our our tags look like that we use along the supply chain. Half of it is attached to the tree harvested, and then the other half is attached to the stump. Now I will go into the introduction and the structure of the Guyana National Forest Certification System. This is more on the meat of things. So as I would have mentioned earlier, we would have started sustainable forest management practices early in 2000 by developing initiative, regulation, procedures, and management system in close consultations with our stakeholders within the forestry sector to underpin our sustainable forest management objective. Now, the next logical step for us was to develop a national forest certification system which offers independent third-party certification to operator within the sector, and of course to give them a voluntary option to improve their management practices and to meet market access. Now, our Guyana National Forest Certification, and I will say the GNFCS moving forward, is composed of basically is composed of a suite of documentation that determines the administration of the process and the standard documentation that operators here in Guyana will need to meet to follow the requirements of certification by an independent body. Now, with regards to operator meeting certification and depending on their nature of operation, they will either need to meet the forest management standard, which is the Guyana Standard for Sustainable Forest Management, the GSSFM, or um, the adopted chain of custody of forest of forest and tree-based products requirements. Um, so under the forest management standard, operators will also be given the opportunity to form a group to meet certification. And under the group mechanism, it has its own requirements, but one of the main benefits is basically to help these operators share resources, share their knowledge, and costs to meet certification. Sorry. Yes. So regards to the scope of the GNFCS, it will cover all forest management on all. It will cover forest management on all land tenures that I briefly listed earlier. However, we will not capture, we will not have certification on any land where timber will be salvaged. And that's, for instance, on mining leases or permits or agricultural leases where the land may be entirely clear for other land use purposes. Certification will cover both the timber products as well as non-timber forest products. Now, here in Guyana, we do not have any plantation forests and we do not have any tree outside of forest. However, the standard currently does not capture this. However, in the future, if we do have plantation forests and trees outside of forest, we will amend these in line with the working group and consultations with local stakeholders here. We will amend the standard to include requirements of these two types. So the certification will also capture, like I mentioned, both the individual forest management and potential group schemes. And of course, we will facilitate chain of custody certification for processing, purchasing, and trading of forest timber products along the downstream of the supply chain. So this diagram is basically showing the roadmap of activities, the summary of our standard setting process. So I'll start from the left hand, from the very beginning, 2019. In August 2019, the Guyana Forestry Commission applied for membership. But before applying for membership, the Guyana Forestry Commission would have submitted a proposal to its board of directors, seeking approval on whether we should have a process like this here in Guyana, and that approval was given, and then we made application to the PEFC Council for membership. Later on that year, we would have been given approval for membership, and a membership was approved in November. However, as you can see, there is a gap from 2019 to 2021. This process was put on hold due to our local election here and the subsequent outbreak of the global COVID-19 pandemic. However, in 2020, the PEFC Council agreed for the process to restart by using online remote resources. But because the COVID-19 pandemic, we decided to start until March 2021. So in March 2021, we held our first national scoping meeting, where the Guyana Forestry Commission presented an outline of the standard setting procedures. We included the stages of the standard development, the selection criteria and operation for the standard setting working group, and whether stakeholders here in Guyana would have want a process like this. And also, the GFC give the stakeholders an opportunity to nominate representatives for a potential working group that will overlook the technical aspect of this development of the standard. So we also started our stakeholder mapping exercise, which aim at identifying the relevant stakeholders, both interested and affected. We commenced that process before the first scoping meeting, which helped in identifying potential invitees for our scoping meeting, and also to inform us on the formation of the technical working group. Now, as I mentioned, Guyana has a population just around 800,000 persons, and our stakeholders here in the forestry sector, direct stakeholders, we have about 500 forest sector operators. Now, using the stakeholder mapping exercise, close to 50% of our direct stakeholders were invited to the forest scoping meeting, and 50% of those, sorry, 50 participants attended the first scoping meeting. However, due to the COVID-19 restrictions, that meeting was held online. But GFC tried to utilize as much social media platform as possible to ensure that there was much awareness. So the session was also recorded and streamed live on our government Facebook page, which have over 25,000 followers. Now, at the first scoping meeting, following a no objection from major associations and organizations that represent key stakeholders here in Guyana, like the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association, the Forest Products Association, and the Environmental Protection Agency, and other key stakeholders, the Guyana Forestry Commission formally started the process of forming the technical working group, what is known as a National Standard Setting Working Group, and it is comprised of 20 members. So as we continue with the mapping exercise, we drew on members that from previous technical working groups from other initiatives. Like, for instance, we had to develop a technical working group for negotiating the voluntary partnership agreement with the European Union, which is quite similar to the PEFC process. Both initiatives are aimed at reducing illegal logging, like I mentioned earlier, and having improved market access and promoting sustainable forest management. And I must say that GFC led this agreement. So we draw on that knowledge, and we extracted members or made recommendation. Well, stakeholders made recommendations using representatives from that working group to inform this technical working group for the PEFC process here in Guyana. However, during the mapping exercise, it was also observed that we needed representations for women, youth, and forestry workers as part of a union, academia, to be on this working group. And I must mention that throughout this process, GFC published notices and other useful information via our website and newspaper articles. Now, in July 2021, we started to develop the relevant standards. And then until 2022, in mid 2022, where the standard was at reach a stage for it to be pilot tested and have its first round of public consultation for 6 days. And both processes, of course, were based on consultations and approval from the working group. So in 2022, we also had the pilot test, which is basically a desk review and a field test, which was done by an independent consultant for review of our standards, both the forest management standard and the group's standard requirement, to check that it was in conformity with the PEFC benchmark standard and the verifiers and the indicators were auditable in the field. The main conclusion from the pilot test was basically that both of our standards, the forest management and the group certification, it they were both comprehensive. They broadly met the PEFC benchmark, and our indicators were normative, clear, and measurable. However, there were suggestions made to the standard, and they were presented to the working group, and the working group reviewed these changes submitted by that consultant, and they made the changes wherever. During that period as well, we had our public consultations from June to August. However, there were no major feedback during the public consultation. But what we did receive were a letter of endorsement from major associations that represent large amounts of stakeholders here in Ghana, especially from the private sector and the indigenous NGOs. So at this point in time, from the outcome from the pilot test and the changes that were updated in the standard, this led to the standard being made to a stage to have the second round of public consultations for 30 days, which was held from November to December of 2022. However, during this period, no feedback was given during this second round of public consultation. Ultimately, endorsements were given on our GNFCS for submission to the board of directors. That is the highest decision-making body of the standardizing body, and the NGP, the national governing body. And they also gave their final approval for submission to the PEFC Council. Now we're at the stage for the public consultations for 60 days and ultimately for an assessment. We're hoping also, given all things being held at equilibrium, we will have our endorsement probably in the first quarter of 2024, leading on to our first having a witness audit to have a certification body here in Guyana, an accredited certification body, full endorsement and mutual recognition, hopefully by May, June of 2024, next year. Now, I will just touch a bit on the consultation process, what we did during the public consultation, and some stakeholders engagement. Now, in terms of our working group, we have 20 members, all drawing from the private sector, government, civil society, like I mentioned, representing the indigenous NGOs, the environmental NGOs, women, youth, academia, the union, and so forth. The Guyana Forestry Commission, we play an integral role in providing technical support. Now, during our consultations, the Guyana Forestry Commission, we would have done some stakeholder engagements. And I must mention that during the public announcement, we ensured that notices were placed on our website, in newspapers, so that stakeholders were informed of the consultation periods. We had the start and end dates for consultation, and how to obtain hard copies or electronic copies, and how to provide feedback into the process. Now, we also had stakeholders engagement. We had conducted extensive community outreach throughout Guyana. This was at our discretion, just to ensure that the disadvantaged and affected stakeholders were appropriately reached. And as you can see in the pictures, these were some images of our stakeholders engagement. We also had radio programs, and in the upper right picture, those persons in the pictures were representatives of other government agencies going out there to promote awareness on compliance requirements, just to help build some compliance here in Guyana. Now, during the development of our national Forest Certification System, at the working group level, we would have had 21 working group from 2021 all the way to 2023 for the final approval. Online process was used. However, the working group had the access of having hard copy or electronic copies of the standards. Notices were given for meetings. Members who were unable to attend meetings, they were given the opportunity to provide comments by email in advance or after meetings were held. The decisions at meetings were held on a consensus basis. But however, sorry, in regards to the final approval, the working group members were given the opportunity to have both face-to-face, online meetings, telephone calls, email requests, and to give a no objection with regards to making a decision on the document. So I already touched most of the points here on the slide in terms of our approval process. I must mention that there were no objection uh, on the throughout the process. So as I mentioned, the GNFCS is comprised of a host of documents, but one of our main documents is the forest management standard, of which operators will need to comply with if they're going for forest certification with regards to their concession. Our standard has 11 principles, 50 criteria, and 139 indicators. The 11 principles covers pillars of sustainable development, which incorporates the social, fiscal, and environmental aspects that gives assurance that an operator is harvesting legally and sustainably. I won't go through all of the principles, but as you can see, it's on the screen there. So our group certification standard, it allows for certification of a number of forest owners or managers under one certificate, and in itself, it establishes specific management structure that what a forest manager and the members will need to comply with. With regards to our chain of custody standard, the working group, we would have adopted the international chain of custody of forest and tree-based products requirements of PEFC ST 2000 to 2020. We would have adopted it without any modification, and it covers the requirements for a chain of custody. And this document would allow operators to make claims once, obviously, it is they meet the requirements of the standard. It will give an operator to make claims to a customer on the origin of forest and tree-based products, to say that the timber products were managed sustainably or recycled under the PEFC control sources. Now, apart from our forest management standard, the adopted chain of custody standard, and our group certification requirements, these are our other key technical documents that form part of our national forest certification system. The standard setting procedure, this basically gives the guidance of how the entire process should be conducted, and on how the working group, the procedures that the working group are needed to follow. So I won't touch on all, but I will just briefly highlight quite a few. So we also ensure that the system has a complaint and appeal handling procedure. So this would ensure that during the development and implementation of the GNFCS stakeholders will be given the opportunity to lodge a complaint or to make a comment or provide any feedback through a transparent and accountable mechanism. We also have the our administration document that will guide the GFC on how we will manage the system here in Guyana. And the last checkbox on the lower right is the PEFC checklist that we use to develop all of our standards, most of the work that we did here to ensure that it's in keeping with the PEFC international benchmark. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any comments or questions, please be sure to put it in the chat box and we will address it during the Q&A session. I will now hand you over to my colleague, Dr. Asumadu Kwame, who is the technical resource person on this development of the system. He will spend no more than 5 minutes to look at how the GNFCS, in terms of the strategy and the marketing that we have for the system and its development here in Guyana. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Kwame.
Thank you, Basmati. Thank you for an excellent presentation. And greetings to you all who are participating in the webinar today. The objective of our marketing and development strategy basically is to encourage maximum uptake of the system by the industry in Guyana as part of the industry and government forest sector value-adding strategy. Although the Guyana National Forest Certification System is a voluntary, non-mandatory system, fortunately, it has the full support of the government and the key sector stakeholders. Soon, the Guyana Forestry Commission and the key sector stakeholders will discuss how to structure the certification system to encourage maximum uptake through one, individual certification, because large operators may want to do their own certification, and also group certification, as my colleague Basmati has explained. Our strategy will focus on how to minimize cost under the system to encourage maximum uptake. And the cost management strategies that we have in mind and will be developing are through maximizing uptake of group certification under the system, and also encouraging the development of homegrown certification bodies and auditors to enhance competition and minimize the opportunity for marketplace monopoly. We also encourage the government of Guyana to work with the Guyana National Standards Board to become a member of the International Accreditation Forum, so that in future it can accredit the Guyana system and the certification bodies and auditors. These strategies, we believe over time, will minimize external transfers and therefore make certification under the Guyana system much more affordable. In relation to the marketing strategy, we aim to incorporate it as part of selling the concept of certification as a component of value adding within the sector. As we know, value adding enhances the value and utility of products and services to users. Certification demonstrates value adding in our view through meeting the requirements of sustainable forest management, which is demonstrating the legal aspects of forestry operations, the social aspects of forest operations, so rights of workers, non-use of forced and child labor, payment of statutory fees and charges, welfare of children, paying living wage, occupational health and safety requirements, and also the environmental requirements of protecting high conservation areas enhancing the forest capacity to contribute to carbon cycle, protection of ecosystems, soil, water, and biodiversity, and of course, the economic aspects through contributing to wealth creation and improving the livelihoods as well as national employment and gross domestic product. So we believe that these enhancements, the reason we want to underpin this under the national value-adding strategy is that we believe that certification assists in market access, and these enhancements would therefore add value by enhancing market access, particularly in environmentally sensitive markets such as the EU, UK, North America, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as emerging markets such as in the Middle East, China, Vietnam, India. And these emerging markets are also increasingly embracing independent third-party certification because they see value when they put their products to these environmentally sensitive markets. So it is not a set and forget strategy. Once the system is endorsed and mutually recognized, we have a marketing and development strategy behind it to make sure that it is taken up by as many operators in Guyana as possible. For example, we recognize that for small operators, exporting products to external markets may be a challenge. However, they can participate if they certified, the forests that they're operating from are certified. They'll be able to sell their certified harvested timber to processors in Guyana, who may then have the capacity to process value add and put them into both the domestic and international market. So we have a comprehensive strategy that we're going to work on to make sure that this certification system creates secondary markets for both large and small producers for maximum benefit, both in the domestic market and also international markets. Thank you. Back to you, Basmati.
Thank you, Dr. Kwame. We will now open the floor for any questions or comments.
Allow me also for joining. Thank you for the presentations. I'm just wanted to get the confirmation from Basmati that do we have the chair's address on the webinar, or unfortunately he couldn't make it?
Yes, he joined.
Excellent, because I think that maybe this can be the moment where we can invite the chairperson for addressing the webinar.
Yes, let me formally welcome Mr. Edward Gorbadan, the Commissioner of the Guyana Forestry Commission, and also the chairperson of the National Standard Setting Working Group. Mr. Gorbadan, over to you.
Thank you.
Just give a welcome.
Thank you, Basmati, and thank you, Hubert, and all the members and colleagues joining. Welcome to the Guyana webinar and the International PEFC webinar. We are very thankful for PEFC for guiding us through this process. And when we embarked on this process some years ago, we thought it would be very useful for Guyana, especially in the timber marketing. We recognize there are a lot of competing markets, and our stakeholders and all some very sensitive markets have been asking for certification. And through a very inclusive stakeholder process supported by the government of Guyana, the highest office, our board, the ministry, and the minister, we embark on this process, very inclusive with our stakeholders. So from our side, it's a very inclusive process. Our stakeholders are encouraged and they're looking forward for this process to unfold and to have this in Guyana. It will be the first national certification scheme in Guyana. Even though it's a very small country, as Basmati had mentioned, the forest cover is about 87%. So it's in terms of density and in terms of importance, this sector is very, very important. And also in the climate change, the global fight against climate change, more so the forest plays a very important part. And last year when we relaunched a low carbon development strategy, certification was one of the key components of Guyana moving forward for certification. So at the very highest level, it has national importance, and from the local level, from the technical level, our team has been working together with the stakeholders and also following very carefully the PEFC guidelines. So we look forward over the next couple of months for the process to unfold and for all the boxes to be ticked and for this process to move forward. And we also thank our international partners for all the support and experience we have gained from other countries that have gone through this process before, to learn from experiences and also to ensure that this process moves forward smoothly. So once again, thank you, Hubert, for facilitating this process and for all those for joining us and listening to the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much all for this excellent team effort today. I am very confident that this just shows that how competent the team in Guyana is, and I'm very positive about the outcome of the assessment and the joint work ahead. And with this, I can call again the audience if there is any clarification questions. Again, just to reconfirm that the complete Guyana system documentation is available on the PEFC website, and you are invited to take a look and submit your comments, if any, until July 28th. And just maybe until we have questions from the audience, allow me to congratulate on this very interesting method of the selective cutting, what you mentioned, Basmati, I think, on this, I think it was 1 tree per 2 hectares. So I think that's something very interesting to see. And allow me to have this question that when you identify in the management plans this sustainability level of the harvest, that this is the approach you have, or you have different calculations for these management plan purposes? That would be very interesting to hear. Thank you very much.
Sorry, in relation to the management plan for in terms of how we do sustainable forest management here in Guyana?
Yes, my question was basically that since the standard requires that in the management plans you need to set levels for sustainable harvesting levels, and I'm just wondering that can you give us maybe some figures or examples how it's done in the Guyanese context?
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, for the large concessions, it's on the operator, to develop a forest management plan, which includes a 100% pre-harvest inventory, and also pre-harvest inventory of that area, and also producing a stock map. However, and then once that forest management plan is submitted to the Guyana Forestry Commission, our team will do a 2.5% verification of that information submitted in the management plan. Our forest management plan is valid for a period of 5 years. Now, with regards to the small concessions, GFC, we do our internal assessment on the productivity. We do an overhead inspection on the productivity of our forest concession before we issue small concessions here. Now, with regards to the certification process, what we've done, even though our law does not mandate the smaller operators the private landholders, the Amerindian village to have a forest management plan. What the Guyana Forestry Commission has done is to develop a layout, what is called an area work plan to accommodate the PEFC process here. So it's very similar to our forest management plan, but we've just named it differently so that it doesn't confuse our national system here with the stakeholders, but it has the same similar requirements that will be required as a forest management plan. So anybody who wants a certification will need to have an area. For the smaller holders, the private land, the small concession holders, the Amerindian villages, they will need to have an area work plan to show that the forest is being harvested sustainably. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That makes it much more clear. I didn't see any hands raised from the audience. Myself, I also think that it was so rich in information that I probably will watch it another time to make sure that I captured everything. So thank you very much for all the team to prepare this excellent information-rich presentation. And also I would like to thank for all the participants who joined us today. And I wish you a nice rest of the excellent day. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.